because what I wanted to talk about as far as the Pistons is I was just looking at some of the data on their kind of shot diet, their shot selection, and they are bottom in the league in terms of like frequency of shooting 3-pointers. 29.8% of their shots come from 3-point range, which is rock bottom in the NBA. And they don't shoot it poorly, about like average, about 36%, but they it's not working for them to take essentially like very, very few threes. But I looked at their roster and it's like who would be taking the threes? You know, like I just don't know what they can do to turn things around. But do you have a kind of an assessment on the Pistons and at least some long range, long term trajectory that you can say that might make it less sad for me at least?
So I think the Pistons are a really good case study of your entire basketball thesis and in terms of the value of shooting. Because what we're seeing in Detroit right now is the bottom of the mountain of a snowball effect that starts when you have no space. Everything that we're watching in Detroit, the first domino is that nobody is allowed to operate in any space. So how do you evaluate any of these players objectively in a vacuum when it's basically like every single player on the team is individually operating with one hand tied behind their back.
Yeah.
And Cade Cunningham has the ball. Okay, well, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, and two bigs. Their best spacer is Isaiah Stewart in their ideal lineup right now. Cade Cunningham, who they want to be, an elite primary engine, is probably their best spacer. That can't happen. So the first step needs to be that these players, they need to improve as shooters, or they need to bring in shooting. Jaden Ivey specifically needs to become a better and more willing shooter. Even if there are lumps, even if Jaden Ivey spends a month shooting 25% from three, he needs to get comfortable shooting, 6-7 threes a game. Or Cade Cunningham needs to say, okay, I'm not going to be Luka. I'll be a more willing off-ball shooter, and he needs to be the threat. They need space. They need gravity, or else you can't objectively analyze this team in a vacuum, because everything they're doing right now isn't really paramount to what they'll do on a team that's trying to win.
I think I just want to jump in because I think that's an amazing point. I think that what you're saying, yeah, I love that you brought this point up. I agree fully that you can't really assess and analyze these players in this kind of contrived condition, which is totally antithetical to the modern NBA, which is that they're playing on this like small court, essentially. Like they're playing on this like really tightly packed court, and you just don't know how good these guys are, because obviously on a widely spread out court, players are able to perform to their best ability. And we see kind of not only are they as good as they are, but they're be able to be made, I don't want to say better than they are, that doesn't make sense, but they're able to be like, they're able to have their skills be shown off in the best light. But having this kind of like inability to space the court, all these guys are seeming worse than they are, honestly, because these guys need space. Their best shooter right now is Alec Burks. And with Alec Burks on the court, their offense is 7.6 points better per 100 possessions. And that's not a coincidence, like that's because he's the one guy who can shoot 40% from three, like on high volume. So yeah, I think that's just a tremendous point. I just wanted to kind of emphasize it.
Yeah, it's almost like a social experiment. Like, what would happen if you stuck 5 players who it's so weird, because like you just said, if you put Asar Thompson, even this rookie version of Asar Thompson, on a team with 4 shooters, his impact would be more pronounced. And you can say that for every single player on this team. So like, there are people calling Cade Cunningham a bust. Maybe he is a bust. I don't know. Maybe he's never going to be worthy of the number 1 pick. How can we truly know that in these conditions that he's playing? And we're not. So it's tough to gauge what their long-term trajectory is going to be like, until man, them missing out on Chet Holmgren is just they were supposed to have the number 1 pick that year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And I think they fell out of the top 3. Because that was the year they got Ivy, right? And
that's the year they got Ivy. Yeah, that would Chet would fundamentally change everything for them, honestly.
Right. I don't know what else there is to say about the Pistons, because until they get spacing, it's just the best thing I can say about each Pistons player right now is there have been flashes, like I covered on the High Hand Theory Twitter account. I think Cade and Ivy have improved playing off each other. I really like what I've seen of them playing together in a small sample. But how much better how much more pronounced would that seem if their 3 through 5 players could shoot better or could shoot at all? I mean, it's wild watching them, how jumbled the spacing is. The defenses just don't care about any of them out there. In a weird way, it's kind of a compliment to them that they're able to score even as that they're not laughably the worst. Like, in my opinion, based on how little spacing there is, they should be way below every single other team in the league. Think about all the other bottom dwelling teams. The Spurs right now, yes, we were joking a little bit earlier about Jeremy Sohan playing point guard. But I mean, they have Devin Vassell, their center. They have 2 willing shooters at power forward and center in Wembanyama and Collins. I know Collins hasn't actually shot the ball well, but he has minimal functional spacing as a center. He gets closeouts when he gets the ball at the top of the key. The defenses don't want him just stepping into wide open threes. Mm-hmm. Keldon Johnson, I think he's an overrated overall player from an impact perspective. He can shoot the ball. He's a better shooter than anybody in the Pistons starting lineup. Sans maybe Cade Cunningham. The point is that the gap between the Pistons shooting and their spacing and every other team in the league is so unbelievably wide, way wider than the actual offensive output is. And so I don't know. I think there's a chance that Pistons players, because they're not just going to keep this core. They're eventually going to, say, okay, like, we can't just keep running back this core. We have to make fundamental changes. And I think that there's going to be a chance for teams in the league to buy low on Pistons young players, that they basically just say, like, okay, we need to add space. We need to get rid of these guys. And teams are just going to be like, okay, well, they haven't done anything in the NBA yet. But as I alluded to, I think almost all of these players, if not all of these players, would be immediately more impactful in more optimal conditions around them.
Yeah, so you went exactly where I was going to lead you, which is, do you imagine that a bunch of these Pistons players get dispersed around the league and then are like really good when they get into different environments and context? Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask you.
I think Cade is safe. I think when you take a guy number 1, like, he's at least going to get
they're not moving Cade. Yeah,
a second contract. But like Jaden Ivey, like, that is a talented dude. You put Jaden Ivey in a slightly better situation. I mean, who's to say he can't just immediately be a high impact 6 man who just, initiates offense versus opposing teams' bench units in space when he can get into the rim. And then all of a sudden, and the thing I haven't talked about here, which is vital, it's really hard to improve during these games as a player in these conditions. It's hard enough to just impact the games positively. It's even harder to, like, hone your craft. If you're Jaden Ivey and you're saying, okay, I know how to get to the hoop, but I don't know if I'm the best at making rim reads, when I should shoot, when I should kick out. Well, you're not improving your ability to kick out when there's no one to kick out to. All of a sudden, Jaden Ivey goes to this other team. There's more options. There's more film to study. This is a player that's his improvement trajectory has a better chance of going up. So all these things, again, to use the domino or the snowball example, these are all individual dominoes that add up and just create a shitstorm. And I think that that's what the Pistons are in the middle of right now. And to be frank, I don't know what the first step out of it is. I don't know how they get themselves out of the mud.